And welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. As the winning continues, Paramount, the parent company of CBS, and CBS News has agreed to pay $16 million to settle President Trump's lawsuit over the edited interview with then Vice President Harris during last year's campaign. Trump's legal team said in a written statement that it is, quote, another win for the American people as he holds the fake news media accountable for their wrongdoing and deceit, end quote. And Paramount said as part of the settlement, they will not apologize. The $16 million will go towards the president's future library and not to the president directly. In a post on his Truth Social early this morning, President Trump wrote that his representatives had a long, productive meeting with the Israelis, and Israel has agreed to necessary conditions to finalize a 60-day ceasefire with Hamas. He thanked the Egyptians and the Qataris for their help, said they will be delivering the final proposal, and he hopes for the good of the Middle East that Hamas takes the deal because it will not get any better. It will, in capital letters, only get worse. This is a developing story that we will be learning and hearing a lot more about throughout the day, obviously, but we're going to start things off here with President Trump live on Newsmax from the big event at Alligator Alcatraz in Florida yesterday.
Well, I'd like to just thank everybody for the incredible job they've done. I love the state. As you know, Ron and I have had a really great relationship for a long time. We had a little off period for a couple of days, but it didn't last long. It didn't last long, and a lot of respect for each other. And it's a great honor to be deep in Florida, the Florida Everglades, to open America's newest migrant detention center. It's incredibly built, and you're seeing that yourself. That's why I said, let the press join us on our walk so they can see what's happening. It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon. But very soon this facility will house some of the most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet. We're surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation. And a lot of these people are self-deporting back to their country where they came from. Quite a few. We're amazed at actually the number. We took the FEMA money that Joe Biden allocated to pay for the free luxury hotel rooms, where he's paying hundreds of millions of dollars in New York City, and we used it to build this project. And Ron, it was just a little fraction of that money. The money they spent on that project, I happen to know the real estate developer. He's a he never really made that much, but he became very wealthy. With luxury, he didn't do well. With people that are not exactly luxury, he's made a fortune. I want to thank Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier. Where is James? Where is he? You do a very good job. I hear good things. I hear good things about you from Ron, too. No, you really do. He's even a good-looking guy. That guy's got a future, huh? Good job, James. I hear you did really, really fantastic. Worked hard. You're like in the construction business for a few days, right? Congratulations for all the hard work and to make this facility possible. It's amazing.
The president, with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem on his right, Governor DeSantis on his left, went on to introduce and credit all those involved in the project and those there on hand. He spoke for a bit about immigration and then took questions from the press. First up, Newsmax White House correspondent Mike Carter.
Yeah, please, go ahead. Yeah.
President. Thank you, Mr. President. Given the likelihood of the One Big Beautiful Bill passing, and we look forward to the success of this facility here, how many more facilities like this do you feel that the country needs in order to enact your agenda of mass deportations?
Well, I think we'd like to see them in many states, really, many states. This one, I know Ron's doing a second one, at least a second one, and probably a couple of more. And, you know, at some point they might morph into a system where you're going to keep it for a long time. You know, it's not that far away from jails that take years to build and money is spent and wasted, and like the railway that they have in California that costs like 40 times more than it was supposed to cost. The same things happens with prisons. You look at this in a short period of time. Ron, James, and some of the people that really worked on it along with our people, they did this in less than a week. And you look at it, it's incredible. The incredible thing is picking the site, because the site was one of the most natural sites. It might be as good as the real Alcatraz site. It could be. Well, that's a spooky one too, isn't it? That's a tough site. But so I think it could last as long as they want to have it. I mean, you may morph this into your prison system, frankly, which I know you always need, unfortunately. I'd like to say, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an auto pen maybe that allowed it to happen, and it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time, people that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them, people that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country. I think we ought to get them the hell out of here, too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together. But I think getting them out, we forget about them. We had some bad accidents in New York, and they're not accidents. They were done very much in purpose. People being pushed into a subway just before it arrives, going 40 miles an hour. And they're 10 feet away from where the thing is, to get pushed right into the face of the subway train, get whacked and killed. And these are sick people. I'd like to get them out of here, too. Yeah, please, go ahead. White shirt, glasses.
Julio Rosas, Blaze Media, sir. A couple months ago, I ran into former DHS Secretary Mayorkas, and I asked him a couple questions about his disastrous handling of the border. He didn't like my questions. But the number one question that I heard from people in responding to my video was, why hasn't he been arrested yet? Obviously, you guys are cleaning up the mess that was made deliberately for the past 4 years, and so people want accountability. It's great to see that the border is secured, and it's great to see the state level cooperation. But I guess I would ask you, why hasn't he been held accountable, or anybody really? Well,
pardons were given out by to many people, and they shouldn't have been given out. Like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs was given a pardon because they destroyed all of the information from 2 years of hearings, and they should be arrested, but they were given pardons. Was he given a pardon, Mayorkas? Was he not?
I don't believe so.
Well, I'd take a look at that one, because what he did is it's beyond incompetence. Something had to be done. Now, with that being said, he took orders from other people, and he was really doing the orders. And you could say he was very loyal to them, because it must have been very hard for him to stand up and sit up and talk about what he allowed to happen to this country and be serious about it. So he was given orders. If he wasn't given a pardon, I could see looking at that. In fact, why don't you take a look at it, Kristen? He was impeached, but it was just a fake impeachment. It was a fake impeachment. Why don't you take a look at it? I think he was so bad. They were all so bad. Look, it was the worst president in the history of our country. We've had some bad ones, but he was the worst president. But somebody told Mayorkas to do that, and he followed orders, but that doesn't necessarily hold him harmless. So take a look at it. Very good question, actually. Thank you.
President Trump saying, yes, they should investigate charging Alejandro Mayorkas. He also mentioned the real Alcatraz. Remember, like a month ago or so, he floated the idea of reopening Alcatraz. Maybe this will lead to them thinking more seriously about doing that. All right, Rob Finnerty is going to pick up coverage.
And here is an honest question. Have you ever had to run away from an alligator? How fast can alligators actually run? I can remember my grandfather, child of the Depression, used to collect golf balls that people had hit into the woods and sell them back to golfers for a dime down in Florida when he was a kid. And he always said that you had to be on the lookout for the alligators, and I think I believe him now. And that brings us to the brilliance of what Donald Trump just did today, something that 80 million Americans definitely voted for, and another return on not only what makes sense, but what we call common sense on this show. After 4 years of utter insanity and chaos at the southern border that we were all told was normal, 15 million illegals break into our country, and we're told, yeah, nothing to see here. and U.S. taxpayers put them up in luxury hotels, 4- and 5-star hotels, not that far away from where we're broadcasting tonight. We gave them cell phones with cell phone plans. Think about that. Meaning they could call whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted. We didn't give them calling cards like I had when I was in college. We gave them full-on AT&T cell phone plans. Government planes flew them free of charge all over the country except to Martha's Vineyard. That did not work so well. Not Martha's Vineyard. They were thrown off the vineyard. They were all served culturally appropriate, sensitive meals. We gave them clothes. We gave them free health care. Whatever they needed, they got. When all we really needed to do was send them back to wherever it is they came from, and now that's going to happen. The President of the United States flew to South Florida today to tour Alligator Alcatraz, a new ICE detention facility built to house illegal criminal aliens, something the President was asked about this morning.
I guess that's the concept. This is not a nice business. I guess that's the concept. If snakes are fast, but alligators we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison, how to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%. Okay? Not a good thing.
Okay, so this is a very good point. We looked into this. The American alligator can grow up to 15 feet long. They weigh over 500 pounds. They can live for more than 50 years. They can run up to 35 miles an hour on dry land. They're even faster in the water. And there are over 200,000 American alligators right now living in the Florida Everglades. And you've got to trek through almost 50 miles of Everglades, wetlands to make it to Miami, meaning nobody is ever going to escape from this prison and live to tell the tale. And that's the point. Meaning Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis just created the greatest illegal alien deterrent that we've ever seen. And Kristi Noem wants to roll this out nationwide.
This facility is exactly what I want every single governor in this country to consider doing with us. A young man named Jimmy Percival in my office, my general counsel, who came from Florida and used to work here, called up the Attorney General and the governor and said, hey, what do you think about partnering with us on a detention facility that we could put in place that would allow us to bring individuals there? There's an airstrip close by. You guys volunteered the assets that you have and the connections that you have, and worked with Kevin extensively so that we could come here, have their due process given, and return them home to their countries. And in 8 days, this facility has been stood up.
8 days. And that's what 80 million Americans voted for. Instead of giving illegal aliens iPhones, we're giving them alligators. And today we heard on CNN that Alligator Alcatraz is inhumane. Is it? We don't think so. It's got air conditioning. Everyone gets 3 meals a day and a bed. And if you don't want to get eaten by an alligator, don't try to escape and you'll be just fine. That's not inhumane. That's really good advice. It was the same concept with the real Alcatraz in San Francisco, surrounded by water in the middle of San Francisco Bay. And we sent the worst of the worst there for years. The currents there, deadly and constant. The average water temperature, 55 degrees. And that's in the summer. And it's 1.5 miles from shore. And even with all of that and the threat of sharks, great white sharks in San Francisco Bay, 3 inmates escaped from Alcatraz in 1962 and were never heard from again. They even made a great movie about it starring Clint Eastwood. But something tells me that's not going to happen down in Florida.
Rob Finnerty, host of Finnerty, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to hear more from Rob in a little bit, but I've lived in Florida for a long time. I've been to the Everglades numerous times. Believe me, no one is going to successfully escape. I mean, they may try and escape, but like Rob said, they're not going to be successful unless maybe they have their crew bust in on airboats with machine guns like, some kind of Jason Statham movie or something. For all the naysayers, for lack of a better term, the inside of this facility, which you may have seen by now, doesn't look any different or much different than any detention centers that were set up by the Obama administration. The president who deported more people than any other president to date, Barack Hussein Obama. More than 2.5 million people, and that doesn't include the ones that were turned away at the border. Nobody was complaining about cages back then, except maybe some Republicans. All right, up next, Carl Higbie spoke with border czar Tom Homan.
Well, Trump is attending the site in Florida known as Alligator Alcatraz, which we brought you last week. That's going to house 5,000 illegals, or maybe even more. My next guest is out there finding the people to put in it. Also, funny that while construction trucks are going in and out of that whole area to build it, people are protesting it. But I'd just like to point out that in a state that made it legal to hit a protester who's blocking the road, basically, not a single person is blocking traffic. Weird. We're bringing in my friend Tom Homan, the border czar for President Donald Trump. They're protesting this, calling it inhumane. But, you know, Tom, I remember living in a tent in Iraq, oftentimes with no AC in the middle of summer. Nobody complained about that being inhumane for me when I was serving the country, but it's bad for illegals?
No, it's ridiculous. All he says is the highest detention standards in the industry. I'll put our detention standards against any state prison, any federal correctional facility. We got high detention standards at high cost. And look, like the president says, we're talking about people who are in the country legally that are public safety threats. Now, how much luxury do you want them to have? And this facility is going to give exactly what the left's been screaming about: due process, due process, due process. Guess where due process happens? At this facility, because there's going to be immigration judges there to hear their case and take their pleas. And this is going to be their last stop. When they leave here, they'll be on a deportation plane to their homeland.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like kind of checks all the boxes. That's what they were complaining about. You're giving it to them. But as I mentioned earlier in the last block, the Senate voted on the big, beautiful bill. But it didn't take illegals off of Medicaid, which was one of Trump's signature parts of this bill that he really wanted in there. Where's the White House on this? Are they going to be able to move forward in getting this done in a separate bill? Have you heard any action towards that? Because it's costing us, I don't know, like $250 billion a year.
Look, I can't get ahead of the president on that. I'm not involved in those discussions. I'm a busy guy.
Yeah, you are.
I'm trying to find a few million criminal illegal aliens in the country, so I'm not in the loop on that. The legislative affairs at the White House, I'm sure, is engaged with the Senate and the House.
Sure.
So I'll just leave it at that, and we'll get ahead of them.
Border czar Tom Homan on Frontline with Carl Higbie. After 3 days of debate, the Senate finally passed President Trump's $3.3 trillion tax and spending bill known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. It was Vice President Vance casting the tie-breaking vote after a 50-50 tally, with 3 Republicans voting against it. Rand Paul, Thom Tillis, and Susan Collins. Senator Murkowski of Alaska, who had been on the fence, cast the critical 50th vote that enabled them to bring in Vice President Vance for the tiebreaker. Senator Murkowski essentially negotiated her vote in exchange for a win for her constituents, exempting Alaska from the bill's new food stamp rules for 2 years.
One thing that's for certain is that next year the deficit will be bigger than this year. The bill includes over $500 billion in new spending, and at the end, to get the vote of the Alaska senator, billions and billions and billions more were added.
That, of course, is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. The bill now goes back to the House, where it could face some issues. For one, the Senate version adds about $1 trillion more to the deficit than what the House had initially passed. This is House Majority Leader Steve Scalise on the record with Greta Van Susteren.
Hey, Greta, it's great to be back with you.
Nice to have you, sir. All right, it's now in your lap. It's in the House. So tell me what happens.
So the bill is right now in front of the House Rules Committee, and the members are going through it. We're going to bring the rule first to the floor tomorrow morning, and then we're going to finish up debate and then pass the bill to President Trump's desk tomorrow. So, you know, it's going to be a busy day tomorrow. It's been a busy last few months, but this bill's so important for families all across the country who are looking for the relief and the benefits that come from this one big, beautiful bill.
Is it fair to say that this is, or I mean, reasonable to think that with all the controversy on both sides, is that this would be voted along party lines, and you just have to make sure to keep all your votes as a majority party?
Right, Greta. And sadly, every Democrat from the beginning of this process walked away from trying to help those middle-class families because they just hate President Trump so much. They made it personal against President Trump. And they're going to have to answer for that next year because, look, when you're a waiter or waitress right now working at a diner, you're working late nights, maybe 3 jobs, and trying to raise a family, struggling to get by, the no tax on tips provision is going to be a lifesaver to a lot of those families. You're a shift worker working in a factory somewhere in America. You're working overtime, but you're away from your family, and you wonder sometimes, is it worth it when you look at all the taxes taken out of your paycheck? No longer will you be paying taxes on that overtime work. And that's because of President Trump and House and Senate Republicans. Not a single Democrat, House or Senate, voted for this bill because they don't care about those families who are struggling, but we do, and we're going to fix the problems that exist in our economy, lower inflation, lower interest rates, and help those families who are struggling.
How many Republicans can you afford to lose in the vote?
We can only lose 3. You know, it's been a very delicate balance from the beginning. You know, we got it out of the House without a vote to spare. It, as you just pointed out, got out of the Senate without a vote to spare. In fact, Vice President J.D. Vance had to break the tie. But that's just one of those things. We're in narrow majorities right now. But everybody is focused. 98% of our members are super focused on passing this bill and working with President Trump to get our country back on track. And by the way, this bill delivers on all of the items in President Trump's agenda, from making sure nobody gets a tax increase to those benefits I talked about, to waiters and waitresses with no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, border security, making sure that we build the wall, that we fund our Border Patrol agents and having the tools to be able to have the same or better technology than the drug cartels in Mexico, energy production. Everywhere from the North Slope of Alaska to the Gulf of America, we're going to open up American energy. That lowers costs at the pumps for families who don't like paying so much under 4 years of Joe Biden's assault on American energy. All that is in this bill and a lot more.
Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise on the record with Greta Van Susteren. President Trump has no public events scheduled for today, according to the White House calendar, but you can be sure we will be hearing from him once or twice at some point, especially with the one big beautiful bill now back in the House for final approval. In other news, the University of Pennsylvania has agreed to ban transgender women from its women's sports teams to resolve a federal civil rights case. We go back to Rob Finnerty.
Welcome back to a Finnerty exclusive now. At the beginning of February, the Trump administration opened an investigation into the University of Pennsylvania, claiming the university violated Title IX by allowing Will Thomas, a man who swam on the men's team at UPenn for 2 seasons before growing out his hair and changing his name to Leah and deciding to suddenly swim on the women's team. After doing that, Will would go on to win the NCAA Women's National Championship, and one of his teammates testified before Congress about what it was like being forced to change in front of a man in the locker room.
My teammates and I were forced to undress in the presence of Leah, a 6'4" tall biological male, fully intact with male genitalia, 18 times per week. Some girls opted to change in bathroom stalls, and others used the family bathroom to avoid this. When we tried to voice our concerns to the athletic department, we were told that Leah's swimming and being in our locker room was a non-negotiable.
18 times per week for a college student. Think about that. Fast forward to today, the Department of Education just announced that UPenn has agreed to apologize for its past Title IX violations and to ensure that women's sports are protected at the university for future generations of female athletes. And joining us now for more on what this means is U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon. Madam Secretary, it's great to see you. The Trump effect in action here.
Very definitely the Trump effect in action. This would not have happened if Donald Trump had not been elected president. He campaigned on this. He talked about how it was unfair for men to participate in women's sports. And shortly after he took office in early February, he signed an executive order to that effect. And today is really a landmark resolution with the University of Pennsylvania to make sure that this agreement and this negotiation that we've arrived at is in place, and to know that women are protected at the University of Pennsylvania, that's for sure. And we're hoping that this is a landmark decision and negotiation that will be a template for other universities to follow if they are in violation of Title IX, and we will be investigating them.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon on last night's edition of Finnerty. And again, that is at 8 p.m. Eastern On Wall Street, stock markets open mixed to flat this morning. The Dow slightly higher. The NASDAQ and S&P 500 at record highs are slightly lower. Constellation Brands, the owner of Modelo, Corona, and many other brands of beer, as well as wine and liquor, is blaming its lower sales on President Trump. They're saying beer sales are down because of the administration's immigration policy. So they're essentially saying that beer sales are down because illegal immigrants have been deported. They also noted aluminum tariffs, the price of aluminum affecting the production of beer cans. Bitcoin and most other major cryptocurrencies are higher. At the time of recording, Bitcoin is up a little more than $1,700, back above 107,000. Be sure to keep up with all of the news and breaking developments throughout the day today on Newsmax, Newsmax 2, that's N2, and of course at Newsmax.com. Also, be sure you have the Newsmax app on your phone as well so you can stay up to date anywhere, anytime. By the way, today is UFO Day, and the people that make up the fake holidays need to update their calendar because the term UFO generally isn't used anymore. They're now called UAPs. Unidentified aerial phenomena. You remember this whole thing from about a year ago, and I still cannot believe that former military pilots brought mummified aliens to Capitol Hill last year. You remember that whole thing? And the whole world is just like, oh, okay. I mean, I really need some follow-up on this. Thanks for downloading the Newsmax Daily. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your day. Pay attention and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.